I made it to the hotel a little after 4 in the afternoon. The Savannah sunlight was beginning to dip toward the west, stretching shadows across the white stone staircase at Azure Palms Retreat. The air inside was filled with the scent of salt-soaked marble mingled with citrusy lobby candles, a carefully constructed coziness that suggested nothing bad could possibly happen here. I walked over to the reception desk with my small Midway traveler suitcase, the one I'd purchased after my most recent promotion, and handed over my identification. The staff member in his uniform offered a smile, tapped on his keyboard, paused, then his expression grew concerned. "I apologize, Miss Mercer," he said quietly, "but I can't seem to locate a reservation in your name." I paused for a moment. "Would you mind looking under the Mason family group?" I inquired. He gave a quick nod, searched again, then leaned in a bit closer. "I do see bookings for Mr. and Mrs. Mason, as well as one for Mr. and Mrs. Jason Linwood, but nothing further." I apologized softly. Footsteps with sharp, intentional clicks echoed on the marble behind me. That familiar rhythm told me exactly who was approaching. My sister, Alyssa Linwood, always liked to make her presence known with sound before she was in sight. My other sister, Rebecca Celeste, called out, her voice sweet yet calculated. She said, "You made it." I didn't expect that. When I turned, I saw Alyssa Linwood dressed in resort-ready style, sunglasses pushed back atop her perfectly tousled hair. Jason Linwood trailed her, phone in hand, distracted by his screen. Neither Alyssa nor Jason showed a hint of surprise. Alyssa leaned closer to the reception. "Oh, that's right," she remarked airily. "I had booked only 2 rooms, one for Jason and me, and one for my mom and dad. Rebecca apparently had other arrangements, but I wasn't sure. I didn't answer her, or anyone else." Scanning the lobby, I finally spotted my parents perched on a plush velvet bench. My father lowered his eyes to the newspaper, pretending to be absorbed in it. My mother was smoothing her skirt. There it was, the moment when everyone silently acknowledged my outsider status, prompting me to turn back toward the front desk. "That's all right," I murmured quietly. "Would you please remove the spa reservation I made?" He paused momentarily, then gave a nod. "Certainly." As I stepped out into the balmy air, my dress, freshly pressed that morning, not for vanity, but on the chance of being noticed, fluttered in the gentle breeze. I stopped at the foot of the stairs and checked my phone. In the distance, across the parking lot, I spotted a small girl clad in pink and tulle gazing at me from the window of the hotel. Delilah Linwood, my niece. She cocked her head slightly before placing her hand against the window pane. Tucked inside my purse, a delicate silver locket I had picked out for Delilah's birthday remained still in its tissue wrapping. I hadn't gotten around to writing in the card yet. I had learned that I should never assume I'll be part of things. At some point, it stopped surprising me when I was left out. It started with group holiday texts that I never received. I was excluded from group photos that were shared and tagged, but I never appeared in them. Meanwhile, decisions were made while I juggled endless meetings, rushed through airports, and drafted research protocols. Eventually, being overlooked became part of my routine. Not something that stung anymore, just something I came to expect. I once believed that achieving more would set things right. That by pushing myself, earning more, or being generous, I'd finally be seen. I discovered I was mistaken. Now, at 35, I oversee a set of clinical studies impacting people across 5 nations. I deliver talks at major events. I assess grants for the Northwestern Research Foundation. The life I've created is defined by the impact I make, not by social media approval. This, I think, is what's always set Alyssa Linwood and me apart. Alyssa exists in a universe of perfectly planned brunches and promoted beauty products. Every seasonal gathering becomes a social media moment. Each word of praise is transformed into a witty post. my brother-in-law, Jason Linwood, continues on, drifting between projects. Their mortgage, private school fees, and family trips are all paid for by our grandfather, Harold Mason. Harold never drew attention to his support. He never claimed Alyssa was the preferred grandchild, but he provided her with $17,000 every quarter from a trust fund he managed. I know this because I assisted him in reorganizing his estate the year before last, after he had a health emergency. Alyssa hadn't answered a single call from the hospital. I remained there for 4 days, built spreadsheets, worked with his accountant, and drafted paperwork. One night, as I was making updates to the trust terms, he looked at me and said, "You're the only one willing to read the fine print, Rebecca. The others are after the ribbon, not the box." I remember giving him a courteous smile, though inside I felt something quietly unraveling. That moment lingered with me like the aftertaste of cold tea, sharp even after it was gone. My sister used to call me when she was having a hard time. Years earlier, she pleaded with me to sign on as a guarantor for a second mortgage. I refused. Instead, I shared some financial management materials with her. She never got over that. "I needed a sister, not a stack of numbers," Alyssa Linwood said one day before slamming the phone down. Yet what Alyssa Linwood actually wanted was someone who could hold things together when the sparkle faded. That was not something I could offer, nor would I ever be able to. I had come to terms with not being the one they boasted about. I was the one merely tolerated at weddings, mentioned in passing during the autumn gathering, until even that reference began to disappear. This time, it wasn't that they forgot to secure me a room, it was a deliberate decision not to. As I stood outside the inn, the weather had turned brisk. The wind carried with it the distinct aroma of late autumn. Wet leaves, smoke in the distance, and a hint of sweetness, like half-remembered recollections. I strolled a brief circuit along the garden path before returning to my room. There seemed little reason to remain in this borrowed quiet. Once I arrived at my door, I hesitated for a moment. The drapes inside were pulled back a bit, and in the mirror above the writing desk, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection staring back at me. I didn't feel exhausted, more resigned, like a novel left open and unfinished on someone's table. I gently placed my purse down, then retrieved the carefully wrapped locket. I unfolded the tissue paper and pressed it flat against the desk. The locket rested lightly, yet purposefully, in my palm. One compartment was reserved for a photograph of Delilah Linwood. The other section remained empty, not from forgetfulness, but because I was holding on to optimism. Perhaps the choice of what belongs there would one day be mine. I recalled seeing my own expression at the window earlier. I didn't look bewildered or distraught, just observant. Children always sense when something isn't right, no matter how well grown-ups might pretend. At the Azure Palms retreat, I didn't get that spot at the table, the one no one bothered to reserve. That wasn't what truly hurt. The real wound was quieter, more subtle. I'd begun to recognize something I'd felt for a long time, though I never had the nerve to say it aloud. I wasn't simply overlooked. Instead, I had been removed, cut out, from a vision of the family where there was no place for me. But here's the thing about removing parts. Sometimes, what gets left out is actually the thread that holds everything else together. I took out my phone, not because I was angry, or even to demand attention, but simply to state the truth, unadorned, just this once more. I tapped on the contact for Harold Mason. He answered after 2 rings. "Rebecca," he said, his tone low and cautious. There was no greeting for the occasion, just my name. "I have something to share," I told him, only the reality of what had happened. Then I began. I arrived and checked in. There wasn't a reservation in my name. I continued, my voice steady. My tone was almost detached, clinical in a way. Alyssa informed the reception at Azure Palms Retreat that the reservation was only for her immediate family, herself, Jason, and our parents, Samuel and Linda Mason. There was a brief pause on the other end. Not a hint of surprise or anger, just the faint change in his breathing, like a chair sliding back at a slow pace. I kept going. My father, Samuel, and my mother, Linda, were there as well. They witnessed it as everything unfolded. Not a single word passed their lips. They didn't make eye contact with me. I canceled my spa session and walked out of Azure Palms retreat. Harold Mason remained silent and didn't intervene. I anticipated that. Harold Mason had always relied on silence to express what words never could. When I stepped outside, everyone had already gathered together. No one came after me. Delilah Linwood noticed me through the window. My voice briefly caught in my throat. I swallowed and managed to speak. I'm at a modest inn close by. I'm all right. That's all I wanted to say. Even more silence followed. Eventually, Harold Mason's voice broke it. "Thank you, Rebecca," he intoned, his voice drawn out and gentle. He paused to breathe again. "That's all I need," he added. "I'll take care of it." He said he would take over from that point and ended the call before I had the chance to reply. His action wasn't unfriendly, just methodical. For a while, I simply stared at the phone in my grasp. Even after the display faded to black, I remained unmoving. There was a sense that something fundamental had changed, not solely within my family, but almost in the atmosphere itself. Harold Mason possessed many attributes. Kind-hearted, yes. Exceedingly giving, sometimes excessively so. Yet beneath that tenderness, there existed an unwavering firmness. He had worked relentlessly to maintain the Mason family's reputation, keep their financial affairs in order, and ensure security for those who would come after. But as he gave his all to that cause, he had failed to notice who truly supported him the most. Up to this moment, I wasn't upset. I didn't even feel a spark of new optimism. I merely conveyed the facts the way I might document an anomaly during a medical study, simply letting the evidence tell the story. And now, it had done exactly that. Everything seemed to start with jolts. My phone started flashing with a barrage of brief, insistent quakes, text messages, unanswered calls, notifications about new voicemails. All of them accumulated with increasing speed, until the very last. I didn't open any of them at first. I simply kept my eyes on the screen, observing as the names appeared one after another. Alyssa, Jason, Mom, Dad. The initial voicemail was from my sister, Alyssa Linwood, her tone firm and abrupt. "Rebecca, what exactly did you say to Harold Mason? He was being utterly unreasonable." I knew how over the top he became when his emotions got the best of him. I urged myself to call. The next message I received was less steady. He locked down the accounts. Every single one. Jason Linwood's card was rejected at lunch. He mentioned upholding the family's reputation. What could that possibly mean? I remained completely silent. By nightfall, the formal message was sent. Not to me in particular, but to all of us. Harold Mason's email came through at 8:19 p.m. I sent this message to every member of the Mason family. The email's subject was, "Statement of Action, October 27th. Today, an incident came to my attention which, while minor indeed, carries immense significance. I knew that Rebecca Mercer was left out of our family's autumn gathering on purpose, and not because of some paperwork error. It was a decision, and decisions always have consequences. From this moment forward, all funds going to Alyssa Linwood, Jason Linwood, Samuel Mason, and Linda Mason are halted with no set end date. Joint trust assets will now be scrutinized, and all future financial stipends are canceled. Consider this your official notification. The Mason name cannot withstand the burden of malice disguised as order. Should I ever forget the essence of family, its privileges are no longer mine. I have gone through it twice. First logically, then emotionally. Harold Mason never relied on exclamation points and didn't shout. His fury showed itself in exactness. And this was nothing if not exact. My next contact was from Jason Linwood. He sent texts, called, and followed up with more texts. This is a financial catastrophe. Alyssa Linwood's words echoed in my mind. You've spun everything around. I have to get clarity on what's going on. Please. Then there was a message from my mother, Linda Mason. An email arrived in the morning. They said we could have built an additional room, but they knew how much I valued my independence. They assumed it wouldn't bother me. Why was I blowing this out of proportion? And now, according to them, my reaction was impacting their retirement plans. We rely on that assistance. I urge you to be practical. Every message felt as if it came from unfamiliar people using the names I knew well. They didn't ask what caused the pain. They only questioned why the results were such a hassle. I chose not to reply. There was no need for me to respond. Later in the evening, I browsed through Alyssa Linwood's Instagram account. There were no updates, no curated image of an immaculate dinner for the autumn gathering, not even a thankful caption. Just emptiness. The lack of communication was more deafening than any words of regret I could have received. For the next 4 days, the tension swelled before finally dying down. The first calls I received were from Jason Linwood. He wasn't upset, unlike Alyssa. Instead, his voice sounded drained, as if the certainty I'd always sensed in him had vanished, and all that remained was a growing void. I didn't know how to explain it in a voicemail. We were really relying on him. I never replied. I figured Alyssa Linwood was taking care of it. I didn't realize we were sitting on a ticking bomb. When the week ended, their house was on the market. A friend sent the real estate link to me. I immediately recognized the white marble island in the kitchen where Alyssa used to film her matcha tutorial videos. The website's description labeled it as move-in ready luxury. The irony struck me. After that, it was Delilah's school. The private tuition disappeared. Delilah's name was taken off the bulletin. Alyssa uploaded a mysterious Instagram story. Merely a photo of a shut notebook, captioned with the phrase, "starting over." No image of Alyssa, no words, just empty digital space left behind. My parents began to use different language. At first, they were rational. "You're on your own now, Rebecca. I earn my own paycheck." Of course, I realized we relied on that support. Then their approach changed to guilt. "Do you honestly want us to risk losing our retirement place at Savannah because of a miscommunication and, at long last, something resembling real transparency? We never intended to cause you pain. It simply never occurred to us that you might actually need us." That was the factual truth. I guess their intentions were never malicious. They had merely presumed that my needs didn't matter. Their reliance on me was not about money. Instead, it was rooted in the faith that I would never leave, that I was always dependable, always quiet, the one who offered forgiveness simply because I had the ability to do so. However, Harold Mason's choice had altered the flow entirely. Now, they were the ones cast adrift. On one particular morning, I listened to a voice message from Jason Linwood. He sounded drained, as if he'd aged. I came across credit cards that I hadn't even realized were in our name. Alyssa Linwood had been concealing debts for years. I believed we shared a future ahead of us. In reality, what we shared was just a safety net on our checking account. There was a slight break in my voice at the end, not for effect, but from defeat. I tried it a single time before erasing it from my device. What I did wasn't an act of vengeance. It was a simple calculation. They had constructed something fragile, so when its support was removed, it simply crumbled. It was a little past 8 o'clock when I received the call. I was on my balcony, wrapped in a wool sweater, watching steam curl from my cup. The garden below had settled into quiet for the evening. Only the far-off sound of wind sifting through leafless limbs and a streetlight flickering on in the darkness. My phone vibrated once, and then a second time. It was Alyssa Linwood. I let it ring for a moment before I picked up. For a brief pause, neither of us said anything. At last, Alyssa Linwood broke the silence. "I realize you won't reply to my messages," she told me. Her tone had lost its edge. It was gentler now, sounding unfamiliar. It seemed worn down, maybe from exhaustion. I never believed it would escalate like this. I didn't answer. I let her tell him what took place. And now it feels as if everything is coming apart. My brother-in-law is livid. My niece sobs herself to sleep each night. It feels as though my world is coming undone. There is a break in my sister's voice. I can hear her breathing in, as if she is on the verge of weeping, but she holds it back. She is saving those tears for another time, or perhaps another person. Out of nowhere, she said, "You always gave me the impression I wasn't enough, that I didn't deserve to be around you. Even if you would never admit it, I sensed it whenever we shared a space. So I made sure you experienced what it was like to feel unimportant too." My words seemed to linger in the silence between us. It wasn't for the sake of being mean, but so things would be clear. In a low voice, I told her, "You didn't make me feel unimportant, Alyssa Linwood. What you actually did was erase me." She didn't say anything right away. There was only a swift, tense breath from her. "After that," I admitted, "I have no idea how to mend this." At last I confessed the reality. I had been holding on to this burden for years. I'm not meant to remedy it. Instead, I need to experience it fully. There was an extended moment of quiet, not because of distance, but from understanding. After that, I finished the phone conversation. It wasn't from resentment, only necessity. 5 months slipped by. Early spring swept into Minneapolis in stages. First came the gusts, then that deep chill settling in my bones, and finally the stillness of freshly snow-blanketed streets. I adapted to a new routine. Early trains, research discussions, solitary evening meals. Calm doesn't always herald its arrival with fanfare. At times, it simply drifts in softly, like the vapor from freshly brewed tea. My name no longer appeared in their emails. Phone calls gradually disappeared. Begging faded into quiet. That silence also carried a certain heaviness, but I had developed the resilience to bear it. One morning, I found an envelope from Harold Mason. An actual letter, stamped and sealed, with his distinctive script on it. Inside, he had written, "Clarity comes at a price, but what it grants can't be measured." Tucked inside was a check, not much in amount, but deeply personal. The accompanying note simply read, "For whatever lies ahead." I didn't deposit it. I chose not to send it back. Instead, I set it in my drawer next to the antique locket, still in its silver wrapping, untouched. Delilah hadn't called. Alyssa Linwood hadn't sent a letter. That didn't catch me off guard, but what followed did. One late afternoon, as I reviewed test results from the Pacific Northwest team, my phone vibrated with a text message. The sender was a number I didn't recognize. The message was straightforward. "Aunt Rebecca, is the necklace you promised me still with you? Delilah." My mom let me use her phone. I gazed at the message for what felt like ages. Outside my window, the remnants of snow had turned to a soft rain. On the opposite sidewalk, a woman hugged her coat closer and braced herself against the wind. I picked up the locket and turned it over in my palm. It felt warmer than I recalled. Or perhaps I had grown warmer, less fearful of touching delicate things that might be damaged. I rewrapped it, using a clean sheet from my desk drawer instead of the old paper. Then I slipped it into a padded mailer. No letter, no reason included, just a name and the address tucked inside the locket. Right before sealing it, I added a single photograph. It was a shot of Delilah Linwood and me, taken when she was 6. Delilah's grin showed off her baby teeth. My arms circled Alyssa, as if I still thought I'd always belong. I left the second spot open. Maybe one day, Delilah will find a person or memory meaningful enough to fill that space. Have you ever found yourself cropped from the picture, only to realize you were the frame holding it together all along?